Absolutely.
and the threat to the rules-based order and ultimately our way of life. So even if you don't care about what's going on in Ukraine, this wolf is coming to your door.
I
And
tell you
you
what,
know,
hold
you
that, hold that. I'm going to start. You're going to crack on with that
right,
because
okay.
I'm going to
So
go.
you right,
Let me
you
do
lead me
the
off,
intro
Sean.
and then,
You lead me
hey,
off.
hey. Hey, welcome back to Voices from the Front. You might guess we've just been talking for a bit, and I'm going to stop him in his tracks because before he gets onto his soapbox, this week's been one of the most politically charged we've seen in months. Trump's imposing sanctions on Russia's oil giants, Hungary's so-called peace summit collapsing overnight, and Europe once again split between those who stand firm with Ukraine and those still trying to hedge their bets. To help make sense of it all, I'm joined again by my friend Cormac, former UK government advisor, strategic communications expert, and someone who's been at the heart of both British and Ukrainian messaging battles. Thanks for coming on again, mate. I really appreciate that. The end of the last one. Go on.
Sean, it's a pleasure, but I've got to take you up on your comment. Me soapboxing, I resemble that comment. Yeah, Sean, as usual, it's great. It's great to link up with you.
Yeah, it's really good. I look forward to it, and it is something we sort of dot back and forth on social media and messaging, sort of. I don't know, not slagging people off as such. I don't want to use that term, but just going, what the hell is going on? You know, and it's nice to get you actually. We're now pushing this podcast out on different platforms and trying to get it to bite and people interested. So it's really good to have you back on. I know your time's valuable,
Sean,
but
can I,
go
just
on,
before we launch in, can I say one more thing?
go.
You know, I was saying to my partner over coffee this morning, I've been doing this for nearly 4 years now. Because in terms of when I say doing this, I mean radio and TV interviews and podcasts over 7 or 8 different countries. And the reason I do it, quite simply, my friends in Ukraine asked me to do it. You and I have become friends through this. Since you got out of Russian captivity and have got involved in what you're now doing. It's a great privilege for me to be able to call you a friend, but it's also in terms of what I do, it's it's so valuable to be in regular contact with someone like you who has so much contact, not just with so much experience, not just what's going on the ground in Ukraine today, which you obviously do, but that absolutely critical story that you have to tell about the fight for Mariupol and how you were treated as a prisoner and so forth. And that has, knowing you, Sean, apart from great to have you as a new friend, but knowing you has really helped to expand my understanding of what's going on. So I just thought it was worth saying that because we reflected on it earlier. But
Thank
yeah,
you.
sorry.
Thank you.
Soapbox
No, I
over.
can't even get. We're going to talk about it later, but I can't even get an interview on American TV yet. All this press and all this drive by
Yeah.
propaganda drive by Russia now seems to be, Dmitriev is in America. Oh, poor, woe is us,
Well,
Russia. You know.
we can talk about disinformation. We can talk about the strength of Russia's disinformation and how voices like yours and mine and other voices for Ukraine are getting crowded out of the media space.
Oh,
And
absolutely.
that is no accident.
And we'll start with the peace narrative then, because I'll sort of start it. I tell the audience I gave you sort of 10 questions that we formulated, put together, and we're going to pick 3 or 4 to go through. One of them was the peace narrative. Putin wants Kiev, in my view. I'm still baffled, like I just said, how Putin and his pets get so much airtime on the media, and the West keeps falling for these illusions of dialogue, especially in America, when Russia's still bombing cities daily, refusing to make concessions, and while figures like Orban are using peace rhetoric to mask their alignment to Moscow. Where do you sit on that?
Oh, Sean, look, there's a few things that I need to say on this, and I feel I've been banging my head off a stone wall for nearly 4 years now. I started putting my stuff out the middle of January 2022 was when I got my first interview with Times Radio here in the UK. It was. And you know, from that day, I have been quoting one of my great Ukrainian friends, a senior diplomat now, who said to me in the very early days, either late January or early February of that year, he said, Cormac, it's very simple. If Ukraine stops fighting, if Russia stops fighting, there will be no war. If Ukraine stops fighting, there will be no Ukraine. Now, Vladimir Putin has told us, he has told the world very, very clearly what he wants to do. There was that long essay that he wrote in the summer of 2021 about the historic relationship between Russians and Ukrainians. He does not believe Ukraine is a real country.
No.
He believes that Ukraine was a construct or an invention of the Soviet Union. He believes ultimately that Ukrainians and Russians are the same people. And he but actually he goes much further than that. We'll talk about how he has treated his Ukrainian brothers and sisters since the full-scale invasion in a bit.
Yeah,
But he goes much further than that. Another great Ukrainian friend of mine said to me back in 2016, he has since become a great Ukrainian friend. At the time, he was working for the prime minister. I was working for the foreign minister. And he said, Cormac, Putin wants Ukraine without Ukrainians. I didn't quite understand what he said at the time, and I'm not quite sure that I believed it, if I'm honest. By God, I understand it now, and I believe it now. And this man, I speak to nearly every single day. Still in Kyiv, himself and his partner, the other night, he was telling me both of them slept in their bath, because that's what he does when there's raids, because his bathroom is the only room in the house that doesn't have any external walls. So he has kitted his bathroom out. That's where he spends his night if there's raids, because he's had friends in very close apartments who have lost everything.
Absolutely.
So yeah, Putin wants Ukraine without Ukrainians. We're talking about disinformation, and I'm going to get exactly to your question. But at the same time, I sat down, going back to my first Ukrainian friend, a guy called Alexei Mikheyev. You won't mind me quoting him. He's currently Ukraine's ambassador to Berlin. And myself and Alexei sat down on a call like this. I think it was FaceTime Alexei likes to use. Again, in the very early days, he was in Brussels at the time. He was coordinating sanctions negotiations on behalf of you. And we said, let's identify the top 5 lies that Russia tells to justify its invasion of Ukraine. And please, those listening, and this is really important to listen to. The first one, in no particular order, it was NATO expansion that caused it.
Yeah, NATO expansion,
right?
yeah.
The second one was Maidan was a US-backed coup.
Yeah, and cookies fit in there somewhere.
Yeah.
I still don't
The
understand.
the third one was Ukraine is full of Nazis.
Yeah.
Yeah, the election in 2019, I'll just say the far right clubbed together to maximize their vote. They got 2.04% of the popular vote, while a Jew of Russian origin, Volodymyr Zelensky, got 73% of the popular vote. There is no Western democratic leader could dream of such a democratic majority in an election which was invigilated and judged to be fair by Western observers. So that's 3. 4 was, of course, Donbass was a civil war. Donbass was never a civil war. It was fomented by Russia, and there were times when there were up to 6,000 regular Russian troops in command and control positions, up to 40,000 Russian paid mercenaries, and up to 500 Russian battle tanks. And the list goes on in terms of pieces of artillery. 500 battle tanks. The British Army currently has less than 130 operational battle tanks, with another 120 in deep storage. At least that's the figures the last time I was told. I doubt very much if it has changed. So put that in context. And in 1 month, when I was in Ukraine, Lavrov said 6 times Russia is not in Donbass. This is the country that lies on an industrial scale. And that's number 4, isn't it? That Donbass was a civil war. And the 5th great lie, of course, and this speaks exactly to yourself, was there was genocide of the Russian-speaking minority. Now, that's the 5 things. We'll come to the genocide. We'll come to that one immediately, because you, Shaun, made your home where you married your wife in the beautiful city of Mariupol.
Yeah.
You fought to the last bullet to save Mariupol, as the people who are looking in here know. When you came over from the UK and you decided to make your home in Ukraine, the first language you learned wasn't Ukrainian, it was Russian.
Russian, yeah.
Mariupol, as you know, is a Russian-speaking city. Mariupol also, and you will correct me if I'm wrong, but my understanding is the local politics in Mariupol were fairly sympathetic towards the Russian worldview, much more so than other parts of Ukraine to the west.
Generally, that in that region, not many people thought that Russia would invade a Russian city or do what it did. Certainly not slaughter over 25,000, and that's a moderate figure, including women and children.
All of my Ukrainian friends that I speak to, and I have made another great Ukrainian friend here, Olena, in London, who's actually a Ukrainian refugee with her young daughter. And she tells me the story how so many of her friends, they rang their cousins or their friends or their contacts in Russia because they could not believe that this was happening. And they found that their contacts were not, they were supporting what was going on completely. But you, a Russian-speaking city of nearly 500,000 population, the size of Edinburgh in the United Kingdom, wiped off the face of the map. As you said, conservative estimates of 25,000 civilians murdered in, what was it, Shaun? 7 weeks?
Yeah, 6 or 7
more
weeks.
than that.
Yeah,
the Nazis in 2 years during World War II murdered 20,000. Putin managed to do conservatively 25,000 in 7 weeks. You know, and I know there are estimates from the mayor's office and other sources. We will never know that the death toll could be over 100,000.
Oh, absolutely. We were just talking about it. You can't get back there. You can't see the mass graves. It's all being hidden, and the figures haven't been updated for quite a while. So it's far more. There's no way we'll ever understand how many people were actually massacred in Mariupol. To be honest.
So having set out, let me just kind of linger on this. Having set out the 5 bright lights, and there are others, but these certainly were the 5 bright ones that myself and my good friend identified, 3.5 years ago. It was NATO expansion. It was Maidan being a US-backed coup. It was Donbass being a civil war. It was Ukraine being full of Nazis. And there was genocide against the Russian-speaking minority. Clearly, all lies. Now, why did Russia actually invade Ukraine? Well, as I've already said, Putin has told us that he did not believe Ukraine was a real country, that he believed it was part of a greater Russia. This was covered. There are 2 reasons, and I believe 2 reasons only, that he invaded Ukraine. The Maidan Revolution of Dignity was the last straw, because this was one of the last, this was one of the recent great organic popular revolutions in Europe, which overthrew a cruel pro-Moscow dictator, which the people did. There was no greater threat to the kleptocratic, mafia-based regime in Moscow than for the Russian people to see a thriving, free, democratic Ukraine on their doorstep, and having the ever-increasing living standards and quality of life that brings with it. It was simply something that Putin could not risk, and he had to snuff out. And of course, the second thing, going back to what my great friend said about Putin wanting Ukraine without Ukrainians, what does Ukraine have? It has the black soil and one of the world's great breadbaskets. It has the rare earth metals, which have been the subject of the deal with Donald Trump earlier on earlier on this year. It has, how did the USSR, not Russia, how did the USSR get to the moon? They got to the
all
moon
its
with
research
Ukrainian
and development,
with Ukrainian scientists. And I know a personal example, the great man that I worked for, Pavlo Plinkin, when he was Ukraine's foreign minister for 2 years. I was talking to Pavlo one day and saying, how did you get into diplomacy, Pavlo? He said, well, originally I was a rocket scientist. Because I'd seen from researching him that he had an honors degree in maths and physics from a university in Moscow. Oh, Pavlo, by the way, was born in Kursk, and his first language was Russian, going back to the Russian-speaking minority and so forth. There's no greater Ukrainian patriot that I have come across than Pavlo Klimkin, though I've met an awful lot of you. So that's it. The lies and the real reason, simply a successful democratic Ukraine is too much of a threat. And also, actually, it was greed. This is a war of old-fashioned colonial conquest. He wants Ukraine for the riches that are entitled. And I'll finish off by saying Ukraine was one of 15 Soviet socialist republics. It accounted for up to 40% of industrial output of the entire Soviet Union. It was the jewel in the crown. Putin wants it back.
Absolutely.
Spoiler alert. Spoiler alert. As long as men like you have breath in their body, he ain't getting it.
Yeah, and there's many of them now. So, and I mean, the will to fight still here. And I'll go as far as to say as well, by the time I got here in 2018, they were on about encircling Donetsk and pushing. They'd already pushed them out of Mariupol, 12 kilometers back towards Russia. They were making good headway in 2018. And by 2022, that's when he was looking to invade because he was going to lose ground. He was eventually going to lose everything. His foothold, the separatists were going, so he had to invade. There wasn't really a choice for him to if he wanted to keep what he had. So that's another reason why he pushed the full-scale invasion in Feb 2022, because he was in his last knock-ins. I mean, his whole foreign policy has been a blunder. And we left the last episode on when you came on. I called it Russia's economic pressure cooker. And like you just touched on, with up to 20% of its refining capacity destroyed now by Ukrainian drones, and now US sanctions hitting Rosneft and others, are we watching the slow strangulation of the Kremlin? I think it's probably Trump's done something that quite positive that he hasn't done in the past. I mean, if you put the sums together, this is going to have a major impact, I personally think, on Russia. And now with Dmitriev in literally the next day after Putin saying that the sanctions won't have an impact on Russia. He was in there the next day on a media circuit around America, pushing the woe is me and Russia's the victim. And it was state-of-the-art Russian propaganda. And I've gone as far as to say, with all the atrocities that Russia's done in Ukraine, it's almost like entertaining Goebbels after you found out what the atrocities were carried out at Auschwitz. You know, it's on that sort of line. We know what Russia's done. We know they've stolen children. We know they've got filtration camps, Nazi-style filtration camps. I was in one of them, you know, in the east side of Ukraine. You've also got, the attacks on the hospitals, the schools. Look what they did to Mariupol, the cluster munitions in the cities. You can see the atrocities. How the hell is American media entertaining someone like Dmitriev, who's really Putin's pet? What's your take?
Okay, a couple of things, and I'm going to come to, and don't let me go off too much of a tangent. I want to come back to American media in particular. But 2 points. 2 points first on what you said. First, I urge caution on Trump and these new sanctions, because he has already said, they probably won't need to be in place for very long, because he's the great deal maker, isn't he? And how many wars has he now solved? Is it 9 or whatever? Or so big chunk, a big pinch of salt with anything that Donald Trump said. He spins like a weather vane. And there is a theory that he believes the last person he spoke to. The second point, yes, if these sanctions are pushed through, they will hurt Russia very severely. But Russia is already hurting very severely. It's not a matter of if Russia's economy collapses. It's if the collective West keeps the boot on the throat and gives Ukraine everything that she needs to continue the fight. I have got to say that the biggest impact on Russia's oil industry recently, I think, has been Ukraine's campaign using drones and their own new ballistic missile.
Flamingo. I'll say
Flamingo. I was
before you call it the Pelican again.
I always say Pelican. The Flamingo, which has a range of 10 times that of Storm Shadow. And we believe that Storm Shadow and Scalp are now being used behind Russian lines as well. And this has been very, very effective. And of course, the long range drones. You mentioned, I think, 20%. I did my research and I spoke to actually a friend of mine who is very, very well, has spent time in Kyiv, has spent time in the Middle East, and is very well keyed into the economics. The latest figure I can get is 38% of Russia's refining capacity has been taken out by Ukraine's recent recent campaign. This is why we saw only 2 weeks ago that Russia had to announce and admit that they were now importing petrol.
This is the gas station with nukes.
There are queues all over the Russian Federation. This is bringing the war home to the Russian people. And we know that what Putin fears most is the Russian people. We have heard in the last, I think, 3 months, if I got the figures wrong, that the price of gas at the petrol pumps in Russia has gone up by 50%. In a country where the average person, I'm not talking about the oligarch and the small middle class in St. Petersburg and Moscow, the average person in Russia, 50% of them don't have an inside toilet in their houses. It is not a rich country. So this is bringing the reality of the war home to Russia. But remember, it is very, very important. It is very important that these sanctions continue to squeeze Russia because, okay, let me give you my favorite soundbite of all time. I started saying before the full-scale invasion went in, it's very, very simple. You arm Ukraine to the teeth and you sanction Russia back to the Stone Age. If we had done that as the collective West, this war would have ended by the end of 2022, and I believe it would have ended in Ukraine's favor. Yeah. We have never done that properly. I'd have said, that Joe Biden looked at what Ukraine needed. He gave them half, he gave it to them slowly, and he gave it to them with handcuffs on. And the rest of the West was restricted very, very much by what the Americans did. The Biden administration would not allow Scalp or Storm Shadow to be used inside Russia because the guidance components were American. We believe that ban has now been lifted. There's some...
Yeah, just this recent week, there's Storm Shadows being used inside Russia as well. So, this week, yes. I mean, we've even got through 25 minutes without even talking about Tomahawks. So that's pretty good. So,
we can get on to Tomahawks anytime.
Well, I don't want to spend. I mean, we haven't got them. It was never going to be a battlefield changer anyway, and we were probably going to get a handful of them anyway. I've always said it would never get, but it would have given Putin consequence. It would have, if he wanted to hit a power station in Kiev, we could hit a power station in Moscow. I nearly said Morocco, but Moscow. But that would have given, and he hasn't had that in the 4 years that this war's been on.
Look, briefly on the Tomahawks, and this is what people need to understand. And Zelensky came out it could have been earlier this week. I've been head down with a particular issue at the moment. I lose track of time. But in the last 7 days, Zelensky came out and he gave a statement to the effect of, when Tomahawks were on the table for Ukraine, Putin wanted to talk. As soon as Trump appeared to take Tomahawks off the table, Putin loses interest in diplomacy. That old adage, the only thing that Russians understand is strength. Now, look at what the Tomahawks... Will the Tomahawks be a game changer in themselves? Probably not, and I'm not a military man. You will know much more about this. However, the Tomahawk has about a warhead about the same size as Storm Shadow or Scalp, around half a ton, right? They have a range about 5 times, where Storm Shadow and Scalp can go about 200-300 miles max. Tomahawk can go 1,500 miles. But here is the real difference that I'm told. They are far, far more stealthy, i.e. they're very hard to detect and shoot down. And I have been told, a senior military friend of mine has said that when he was out in the field in operations, he has seen them put through the equivalent of a bathroom window from a range of 1,000 miles. They are incredibly accurate. So, I've been told very clearly it's not either or. If the Ukrainians get Tomahawks, they do want them. They will use them in conjunction with the Pelican and all of the other weapons and Storm Shadow. So they will be a massive, massive help. But
Yeah.
I think the thing is, Ukrainians, they will talk the diplomatic talk, and they'll say how grateful they are. I got close enough to Ukrainians when I was out there to know exactly what they thought. What Ukrainians really think is they are on their own. They'll have to sort it. They're grateful for any bit of help they can get from the West, but the only ones that are ultimately going to defeat Russia and save Ukrainian land is the Ukrainians themselves. So they've got you guys have a very, very pragmatic and callous attitude about you. You have learned it. You've learned it the hard way. So just because Ukraine doesn't get tomahawks, are they going to say, "Oh, no, give up"? No, they're not. They're going to go on. I hope they do give tomahawks, but I'm afraid I went on 2 television interviews week before last, and I predicted they wouldn't get them because
I think I said the same, but I have
little faith. I have little faith in the current in the current resident in the White House.
There is little faith here for the current resident in the White House. There is none at all in Ukraine. It's something I wrote about for my Substack. It's something I write about for my column in the paper. There just is none. I mean, we've heard the Lindsey Grahams and the killer sanctions, and in his car-like sales pitch when he came to Ukraine and spoke to Zelensky, promising all these killer sanctions. Where'd they go? Like a balloon running out of air. Gone. It's another one of those. We knew it wouldn't happen, but it would have given Putin something to think about. Budanov in the last 48 hours was saying along the lines of most of their air defense is on the border, so anything that gets past that, it's got a free run into Russia.
Absolutely.
So Tomahawk would have been devastating. For even the small amount we would have had would have been devastating. So
absolutely,
see how it puts the fear of God into Putin and Russia now.
Yeah, well, fear of God into Putin and Russia. Unfortunately, for most of the last 4 years, Putin has been putting the fear of God into the West, and he's been doing that by rattling the nuclear saber. I was out in The Hague.
Another one today.
There you go. I was out in The Hague, and I always remember this. I was out in The Hague. I have another great friend who's a senior diplomat in The Hague, senior Ukrainian diplomat in The Hague, and I try and get out and visit him now and again, and we hang out for the weekend, because we worked very closely when I was in Ukraine. And he told me, we were walking along the seafront in Scheveningen outside The Hague, having a great day, going on the big whale and drinking beer and everything else. And he told me that the MFA in Ukraine, this was last year, had counted the number of times when the Kremlin rattled the nuclear saber. They'd come up with 120. I mean, there was javelins were a red line. And modern battle tanks were a red line. Brits broke that, by the way. Brits broke the lightweight anti-tank with the NLAWs as well. Brits broke the tanks. Brits broke the long-range artillery with the Storm Shadow. Brits were instrumental, along with the Dutch, in persuading a break on the F-16s. Britain doesn't have X-16s, but my understanding is that behind the scenes, we were pushing very hard for it, and we were involved in the training of pilots and so forth. Every single time, Crimea was a red line. And then the four more oblasts were declared forever Russia. And if you invade inside forever Russia, then it goes nuclear. That was a red line. Every single time Putin has set a red line and it's finally been crossed, he has done nothing because he's a bully and a coward. However, the hesitation that's normally counted in months and months and months has cost thousands and thousands and thousands of Ukrainian lives.
Absolutely.
And hundreds of gallons of Ukrainian blood. And why are we not learning this lesson nearly 4 years in?
Lastly,
we were supposed to be talking about peace.
We're going to move on to something else quick because I'm going to have to take a break in about 10 minutes because we'll have to have a break for a minute. So Orban's double game. It's been a week of Orban where he's obviously started the week pretty high, bouncing around a possible peace summit in Budapest, where everybody here was going, Budapest, you sure? Why? I mean, this is the worst place to have it. I mean, it's like what, Budapest 2.0. You know, it's a dreadful decision by somebody to even announce that they would be having in a meeting in Budapest. Firstly, it only benefits Orban and Putin. Orban flailing in the polls, really needs a pickup, really wanted this to happen. And then with all of a sudden, in a few days, that's cancelled. And Trump's put sanctions on Russia's biggest oil producers. Biggest oil companies. So what's your take on it? I mean, Orban's just gone from hero to zero all in about, a week. So it's probably his worst time he's getting it, right?
I'm not sure who Orban has ever been a hero to. Putin, maybe, although I think Putin probably looks down on Orban as a supplicant who he can manipulate. He is definitely he's definitely a Putin asset. And there's two things at play here. Yes, you said what a dreadful venue for peace negotiations. Budapest, the venue or the place of Ukraine's greatest betrayal, the Budapest Memorandum. And I repeat this because many still have forgotten it or don't know about it. The Budapest Memorandum signed in 1994, where America had persuaded Ukraine to give up what was at the time the world's third largest nuclear arsenal in return for guarantees of her territorial integrity, countersigned or undersigned by the UK, the US, and Russia. Now, critics of the Budapest Memorandum have since said, well, it wasn't worth the paper it was written on, and clearly it wasn't. The key point is Ukraine, at a point where she was very, very weak and economically on her knees, was pressured hugely by the United States, whose support Ukraine needed to sign this piece of paper. And Ukraine signed the Budapest Memorandum in good faith. And I only learned about the Budapest Memorandum in 2016 when I went out to Ukraine to work for the Ukrainian government. And it became very, very clear to me how betrayed Ukrainians felt by on the Budapest Memorandum when Crimea could simply be illegally annexed in 2014 and the Donbass invaded, and we did effectively nothing. We put some Mickey Mouse sanctions in place, which were at best a 1 or a 2 out of 10. So going back to my point, the Ukrainians ultimately know that they're on their own. They will take as much. You will take as much support as you can get. But actually and I'm not talking about you, because actually I see you as more Ukrainian now, Shaun, than a Brit.
Because I live here, yeah.
Both.
Yeah.
No,
I said that to a troll the other day. I said, dude, I've lived here for nearly 10 years now. I don't really know what's going on back home.
Like one of my other great friends who was born in New Jersey, and he's lived in Ukraine for over 20 years and done some great things in the country. And I never see him as American. I only see him as Ukrainian, and he's a Ukrainian patriot.
On a lighter note, I do get told when I make borscht, I was like, how's my Ukrainian borscht? After some feedback, and then I get, Shaun, it will never be Ukrainian borscht. You're British. I don't think it matters how long I'm going to live here. So, it's never going to be Ukrainian borscht. It's always going to be British borscht.
I was going to say you're only blowing. Actually, no, I have found Ukrainians will take it to their hearts more than most people. But moving on, Shaun. They also have a wicked sense of humor, I learned.
They do, yeah.
Moving on, going back to Orban. There are two things going on with Orban. I mean, this was a great fillip to Orban. It should never have happened. It was cancelled when it was made clear that it wasn't going to achieve anything. But here's the other thing about Orban. Orban has spent 3.5 years, in fact, a lot longer. I remember when I was in Ukraine, working with the Minister for Education and Science because of the problems that Orban was generating for Ukraine over Ukrainian language laws in parts of Ukraine where there was a ethnic Hungarian minority. Orban back in 2017, 2018, was using this as an excuse to oppose and frustrate Ukraine's progress, both with the European Union and in its accession talks, but also in any talks it was having with NATO. So this goes back a long, long time. Here's the point. The EU, let's just talk about the EU for a moment. The EU does not have, as my understanding, a clause where they can kick a member out. They do have Article 7, and Article 7 allows for the majority on the EU to suspend a member's voting rights. Article 7 is long, long, long overdue to be applied to Orban and possibly
Absolutely.
Fico also of, and I always get this wrong, I say the Czech Republic when it's actually Slovakia.
So I'm there to guide you. I'm there
I've
to guide
offended.
you. And it's worth saying before we finish this topic, it's worth saying that the Budapest Memorandum was a recognition by Russia of Ukrainian sovereignty.
Yes, yes.
And that's what Putin's lying
they
about.
undertook.
Yeah.
They undertook to protect that sovereignty.
Yeah.
And so I mean, this is but people have very, very short memories. I was involved in a new piece of research into disinformation recently with a group of people I'm getting more involved with here in the UK. And we looked at the effects of disinformation right across the political spectrum, from Tory voters, Labour voters, Lib Dem voters, through Reform and the other parties, right over to Tommy Robinson supporters, people who were recognized as a group of consumers of Russian disinformation, and also conspiracy theorists. So the full range. And the one thing across all groups that we saw, the recognition or the recall of Bucha, of Mariupol, of Irpin was very, very low. People have simply forgotten. How can you forget Mariupol? How can you forget Bucha? But people have forgotten. The only one thing, and it's interesting, the only one thing that resonated positively, and when I say positively, I mean in terms of saying, oh, well, maybe we should support Ukraine on that one, was the story of Russia stealing Ukrainian children. That was the only one, but everything else people forget.
So carry on. So we're talking about.
So we were talking about. I think we were talking about Orban, and it been long past the stage where the EU needs to apply Article 7, which is the one thing the EU can do. They can't kick him out of the EU, but they can suspend a member's voting rights. And I think he has earned that sanction 10 times over.
Sure.
So we're seeing hopefully. We're seeing Orban on the back foot. I don't think we know what sort of pressure has been put on him internally by the other EU members. I expect, and I certainly hope that we can reasonably expect that it has been considerable. The other thing I noticed, there was a massive rally where hundreds of thousands of people thronged the center of Budapest over the weekend, an anti-Orban rally. So, good things happen as well as bad things, and let's hope that Orban's days may be numbered, because this is along with Fico, this is the enemy within. This is somebody, and as I said, I saw it going back. I was talking about work that I did. I spent 2 days with Ukraine's Minister for education and science,
Mm.
doing media training and looking at message development around. She had to go to a big conference and address NATO members about why what why Ukraine was doing what they were doing to promote the Ukrainian language, and how it wasn't actually discriminating against ethnic Hungarians. Orban was very much trying to make a deal out of this. So the problems that Ukraine have been having with Orban go back probably before that, but at least to 2017, because I was involved with dealing with some of them.
Yeah,
But so
absolutely.
yes, Article 7 is long, long overdue.
Just for those that don't know about Ukraine, it's very diverse in its language and its culture. You go from the west side of Ukraine, you're speaking different dialects, some with Hungarian, some with Romanian. And I'll tell you a quick story about when I was handing over a position on the front line up near Mariupol, and the guy says, my translator says, okay, talking to the new commander, yeah, okay, хорошо, da, da. And after 2 minutes, I just said, what did he say? He said, I don't know. He's speaking some Hungarian dialect. I said, you're my translator. He said, I don't know. He's using words I don't even know. That's the sort of
There's some
demographics
there's
you've
some
got.
hu- there's a huge amount of different languages. I can't remember the number. A huge amount of different
Yeah.
languages spoken in Ukraine. People forget Ukraine is a huge country.
Mm.
Ukraine by landmass is the largest country in Europe. It is a very, very big country, and it is very diverse. And it is, Ukraine has been another great guy that I met when I was in Ukraine. I met him many times, but shortly after I went out, we had a breakfast meeting. Let's do a lot of breakfast meetings in Kiev. There was a particular cafe on the way up to the ministry, where you could get a full English breakfast at the time for the equivalent of about £3. But it was a lovely, it's kind of Italian restaurant, but it was open early in the morning. And we used to go up there, and I used to have breakfast meetings there at 8 o'clock, and I'd be in the ministry by 9 or whatever. And this guy, I remember, I'll never forget this guy saying to me, now, on the one hand, Ukraine as an ideal, as a nation, has existed for 1,000 years, 1,500 years. But in terms of he wasn't denying that, but in terms of the current day concept of Ukraine, he said to me, Ukraine was conceived in 1991 and it was born on the Maidan. I'd never forgotten those words. And it
Mm.
was Putin. Putin knows that Ukraine was born on the Maidan. I have a book on my, I'm just looking up for a book on my, the Ukrainians' Unexpected Nation. The first
Mm.
text, a thick tome that I read as preparation, which gives a great told to the history of 1,500 years of where the Ukrainians came from, and then the many, many great friends that I met when I was out there. Well, one friend in particular was a great historian, and we'd sit up till late at night, telling me the history of Ukraine, but also telling me family stories of those who went to the Gulag, and some came back after 20 years broken, and some never came back. And so many
Impressed.
people told me these stories. So many people told me these stories.
Mm.
This is what I really learned when I
They
went to
don't
Ukraine.
forget
I'm
them
going
here.
off. Yeah, I'm
This is
going
another
off.
episode. This is another episode.
Yeah, but the Holodomor is still in living memory.
It is. Yeah, it
I
is.
remember when I was growing up, when I was at university in Ireland, I graduated 40 years ago with my degree in politics and economics from University College Dublin. And I remember somebody saying to me something which I thought was quite remarkable. In Ireland, there was a great famine in the 1840s, which of course is blamed on the English and everything else, and that's another discussion completely. But it was a great famine. The population of Ireland in
Mm.
1840 was 9 million. The population of Ireland the year I was born was less than 3 million.
Yeah.
Ukraine is the only other country on the face of the earth that I know where the population of Ukraine around the turn of the century was around 100 million people. And the population of Ukraine, when I went there in 2016, was
Significantly.
43 million. And
40
it's
odd
now,
million.
because of the war, it is less. They're the only two major, well, Ireland's not a major country, but they're only two countries that I'm aware of that had with that. Every other country, the population has grown. But the thing I was going to say, somebody said to me one day, there are people alive today who met people who remember the famine. So this was in maybe the 1980s, a very, very old person who met a very, very old person when they were a child who remembered the famine. There are people in Ukraine today, and many of them, who remember the Holodomor, and the corpses, and the
Yeah.
starvation, and the anywhere between 4 and 7 million Ukrainians who were wiped out under the boot of Stalin.
And anyone watching this, watch
In a
Mr.
man-made,
Jones. Mr. Jones, a really good film about
watch
it.
Mr. Jones, and
Yeah.
also watch another great film called the name has gone out of my head. It was the first one.
I can't help you on that one.
Savage Hunger, I think. No, there's been a couple of great films
Yeah,
made
yeah.
about the Holodomor. Yeah, but Mr. Jones, actually, sorry, I'll give the stage to you. Mr. Jones is superb.
Yeah,
Mr. Jones
it's
is
really good.
Mr. Jones is, just a warning, Mr. Jones is hard to watch.
It is hard to watch, yeah.
Mr. Jones, there's a piece in Mr. Jones that I will never forget. Mr. Jones, for anybody listening in who doesn't know, Mr. Jones was a young Welsh journalist from the I can't remember the name of the town now. It's where Gavin and Stacey. Any Gavin and Stacey
Oh, I
fans?
can't remember.
Any Gavin and Stacey fans out there will know the town that Mr. Jones came from. And anyway, he was sent out to Russia as a journalist to cover, ostensibly to cover Stalin's great 5-year economic development plans. And when he was out there, he uncovered in 1932, he uncovered the Holodomor. There is a part in the film where people are starving and he comes to a house. It's the middle of winter. He comes to a house out in the country, and there's and the children are in the house and their parents have died. And they're eating food. And he's surprised to have food, but he's eating food because he's hungry. And they're eating food. They're eating beautiful meat. And they're talking about their brother, Andre. Outside was the half butchered frozen corpse of Andre, and he realized that that's what he was eating.
It's horrible. It's very disturbing. They're all based on true stories as well, aren't they?
Not
It's
Andre, it's Mikola. Mikola was the name. It's a very hard film to watch.
Yeah, it's
Mr. Jones ended up
man-made too.
dead a short number of years later, before he hit his 40th birthday, the victim of a Bolshevik assassin. Because he was the first to uncover the Holodomor, which got buried then for.
I didn't know that the Welsh had quite a big footprint.
Sorry. The town he came from in Wales was Barry, which is the same town that Gavin and Stacey was set in. For any Gavin and Stacey fans listening in to our thing, but yes, Mr. Jones, great man, celebrated to this day.
The Welsh had a big footprint out in Donbass, actually. They set up a lot of the steel and the coal works and the mining and everything else. So they've got a massive footprint out in Donbass. And even the factories now, when I was captured, they took me to Donetsk and showed me the factory still with the name on it. I can't remember the name of it, John something or other. But yeah, they have a big footprint, the Welsh, out in Donbass.
And just to finish off on the Welsh, his name was Gareth Jones.
Yeah.
So if anybody's not aware of the story and they want to do a bit of research, just Google Gareth Jones, Welsh journalist. It will come up all over the place. It's a great story, and a great man who lost his life before he was 40 for doing a noble and very brave thing.
Piecing it all together.
Yes.
Let's move on to a new topic quick then. We've got Western unity or fractured. I feel essentially that the Western unity is still there. It's growing. I think we just had this week Gripens, which is amazing. And certainly with the talk of tomahawks and the talk of troops being, once there is a ceasefire, I think the unity is still there. I had to remind somebody earlier when they said, well, Russia's got North Korean troops and much more support. I said, yeah, but Ukraine's never actually asked for troops on the ground. It's only ever asked for support, and that's been pretty shit up until sort of the last 12 months to a year and a half, I think. So I think we're still there. There's still the coalition of the willing seems to have got through a bit of a rebranding, but you've got Pearl, you've got other things going on, and lots of emphasis now being given to Europe to get on with things. America seems to have, I'm not gonna say it, but maybe changed its tune a little. Maybe I understand. Even Trump this week saying, "Don't waste my time. Talk to me when you've made a peace deal." So. It's starting to, the whispers are starting to turn there, I think. I don't think it's fractured as such. I think the only fractures are really coming from Hungary and Orban and like you said, Slovakia and Fico. And, Orban's talks peace, but is essentially giving Russia the funds to keep its war going. So, and PR and everything else. So he's clearly picked a side. So are we fracturing? Or are we on target still to as a group of Europe and NATO countries?
Quietly optimistic, Shaun. What I would say is we have to look less at NATO as a body, and we have to look less at the EU as a body, more to what has emerged as the coalition of the willing, with Britain. Forget about Brexit and all of that. With Britain, who has been from the very, very start recognized as Ukraine's greatest friend. Now, the Ukrainians used to tell me this when I was a senior British diplomat. It feels funny saying that, but actually that was the rank that I had. And of course, they would say that to me when I was a British diplomat. They would tell me, oh, you're the best friend, because I assumed you're probably telling everybody else. You're probably telling the Swedes and the Americans and the Canadians, oh, you're our best friend. I went back to Ukraine. This is worth telling. I went back to Ukraine a few months after I had not just finished my tour of duty in Ukraine, but I had left Whitehall. And I was at dinner there was half of about 12 people around the table were senior diplomats. And I said, look, I got a question to ask you. I said, you used to always tell me when I was working with you that Britain was your best friend. He said, I no longer work for Her Majesty. The individual person, I'm your friend. Tell me the truth. Do you really think Britain is your best friend? And it was unequivocal. Oh, yes, man. Britain is our best friend. And I've been told that over and over and over again. So this coalition of the willing, Britain has a very important leadership role to play in that, along with the French, along with, we're seeing the Germans rearming. Never, never forget, we have this arrogance in the West, in Western Europe, about Britain and France and Germany and the big powers. Never, never, never forget the little Baltic nations. Those three Baltic nations with around 2 million population each, who from the very start have been the firmest allies and spend more per capita on supporting Ukraine than almost anyone. They
certainly know what's coming. I've been to more Baltic countries this
year.
They
understand it. They understand it because they have lived under the boot of Russian imperialism for so long. I will never forget a lunch that I had with a colonel in military intelligence in the Latvian army in 2018. We were at a conference together, Friends of Ukraine in Lithuania, and we were all been taken out to lunch. And we said, shall we have lunch together? I shared an hour and a half lunch with him. I'll never forget. He said, people think we'll be a speed bump. Because he didn't believe, at the time, the thing was, no, we don't have any great faith in Article 5. He said, people think we'll be a speed bump. He said, we will inflict so much pain on Russia.
Yeah, we do. I think it was like a handful of people on the media. There was just me and Aidan sort of saying, we'll give them a bloody nose. And everyone else was going, 3 days, mate, 3 days, you're going to die in 3 days.
Let's go back. Let's go back to the 5 great lies that Russia told about and why they invaded Ukraine, and let's go back to NATO expansion and what Putin had always said. And 2 years ago, 2 new countries joined NATO. Finland, little Finland, 5.5 million population, that can put 900,000 men and women at arms in the field within 24 hours and has more artillery pieces than Germany and France combined. And we know what happened the last time Russia invaded Finland and Sweden. And the Swedes, one, I find them very impressive people and impressive country when I
I like
visited. But
Sweden.
my army friends, my military friends, think some of who we both know have assured me that from their time in the forces and working on joint exercises with the Swedes, they said they are they are very considerable. They are a force to be reckoned with. So Putin didn't get what he wanted. NATO has been strengthened completely. Both Sweden and
Enlarged.
Finland, I believe, are both committed to getting to 3.5%.
As a
Poland
result of
is
his invasion. His
Yes,
foreign
Poland is heading.
policies
Poland.
sucked.
Let's not forget
Yeah.
about Poland. Poland heading to 5% of GDP on defense. So, the coalition of the willing, and we will take from NATO countries. I don't think we want to get bogged down in 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 EU diplomacy or whatever. It's the
Yeah.
coalition of the willing. And that coalition needs to be, and they met in London again, I think, on Friday. I haven't seen the readout yet, but that coalition needs to be agile and it needs to move, and they can do that. And of course, the Canadians are very important allies as well. America, we don't know. America will do what Donald Trump sees to be in his interest. If Donald Trump could really see what's in his interest, the huge threat, the huge threat is coming with China on Taiwan. And those who know are predicting China getting ready to invade Taiwan by 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 2027. The best way to pull China's teeth is to defeat Russia
Russia here.
in
Yeah.
Ukraine.
Absolutely.
So
Yeah.
yes, I can understand. I can understand that Donald Trump wants to pivot away from Europe to the Middle East and say, Europe, look after it. And I've gone on record of saying the one silver lining to what I saw as the cloud of Donald Trump coming into the White House was it would make European leaders wake up and smell the coffee on defense and up their game. And indeed, it has. I see that as a huge positive. So what I
Yes,
would
I
say to
agree with it.
America, so what I said, okay, you won't even give us anything anymore, even though
Mm.
you could afford to do it and it's grand. Just sell the stuff to us. But sell us the tomahawks. Sell us everything we want and keep giving us the intelligence. We are well capable in Europe of doing it. And then you can pivot towards the Chinese threat.
Yeah.
And there was you might put the link on it. There's when you watch it, I shared a 20-minute video. It's published due to be published in the Sun by a friend of mine, Simon Diggins, a retired colonel from the British Army, on looking at the global issue and the Chinese threat to Iran, or no, the Chinese threat to Taiwan, and how that links up. And a very, very interesting quote from Mark Rutte in that
Mm.
is that that Z is quite happy to use its junior partner, Russia, to distract Europe while he gets on, while China gets on with Taiwan. Because Taiwan is not just about taking over a small little island. Taiwan is fundamental to the world's economy and semiconductors, and it is fundamental strategically to the defense of that whole region. So
Mm.
we need to see this in the bigger picture. We need to see this in what I used to call the axis of evil, which is North Korea, Iran, Russia as a junior partner to China. Maybe in a godless world where a lot of people don't believe in God and the devil, I should adopt the what's now the more common term, the axis of upheaval. And that upheaval is of our way of life. So, Shaun, you might, when you've had a chance to look at it, either put that link or people
I'll
can
put the
follow
link into the
you.
show notes that you
Yeah,
sent me
put the
earlier. I'll
link in
put
the
it in.
show notes. And I
Yeah.
should be saying people can follow you at Old Dog, whatever it is, and I'm at
Yeah.
Cormac at 63. We're happy to have, but that's something that I think we need to look at is the bigger picture. So by all
Oh,
means,
absolutely.
Donald Trump, pivot, pivot towards Taiwan. Just don't cut it off. Don't cut off the intelligence
No, no,
and
no, no.
sell us the stuff. And yes, if you can follow through on these new round of sanctions, that will be very, very helpful, Mr. Trump. Thank you very much.
It
But
will
please
be.
follow through. We wait, as I said at the start, big pinch of salt, because Mr. Trump is known for changing his mind and
Oh
blowing in
yeah.
the wind.
He's not
Let's
got a
see if
name
he follows through
Taco
on
for a
this.
reason. I do like Poland's my second home at the moment. I spend a lot of time in Poland, obviously traveling through to the UK and doing a lot of meetings and work in Poland. And I do like the foreign minister Sikorski, is it? Radoslaw
Yes,
Sikorski.
yeah. Sikorsky, really, really strong.
He's on Orban and Hungary quite a bit. He's, pretty much saying what we're all thinking, and there's not many politicians saying that at the moment. And you only have to land at Rzeszów to see all the air defense and all the training that's going on, and the advertisement for new recruits. They know what's coming. They know if Ukraine falls, they're next. Moldova would be next. So they know that. So yeah, they're not mincing their words, and that's something to watch going forward. I think is where Poland stands, because that's a mighty nation ready to go. All right, this is a bit I've been looking
But
forward to, because this is a bit I think we're going to talk about this for quite a while now. The messaging battle, which is something that you're a specialist in, which is something that I've become a specialist in. It's for all the wrong reasons. It's something that I wrote for my Substack recently, saying there's a new phase of the war. It's always been there. It's always there. The propaganda's always been there. However, there's been a recent upsurge in the last couple of weeks of Russian propaganda, especially on social media. Foreign, sort of Western accented Russian supporters now making a beeline for American press. X has taken a suppression stance. My impressions went from last week for 2.6 million from a weekend to barely scraping, I don't know, 1,000 views per post in the last week. So definitely something's going on there. And I'll finish off. Let me just go back through my notes, because there was something else I wanted to say quick. The world's flooded with propaganda, fatigue, and manipulation. How do we keep Ukraine's story in the media and on social media and put the truth in front of the cameras, like I found myself trying to do now, because I've been saying it's not quite like how Russia portray it. It's not Brandenburg in Mariupol. I learned Russian. If he was coming to save us or my family, he didn't save us. He stole our house and then sanctioned me, give me the death penalty, so I can't ever get it back. And there's, when you start to analyze that, and there's all your communities now lost everything as well, and they were Russian speakers. And then you start to, hold on a minute, I now have to get on social media and start talking. I don't have the right to be silent. I've got that platform now, so I intend on using it. What's your take, buddy? You're the expert.
Well, I'm not the expert, but I've been studying Russian disinformation since 2014. And I've been studying it since 2014 because 2014 was when I first started getting invited as a senior British government official out to talk to former communist countries, both in the former Yugoslavia, behind the Iron Curtain, and former Soviet socialist republics, to talk to them on government communications and how that was fed into their democratization process. And I visited about 9, 10 of these countries. And what I very quickly found was that they were all in a very, very similar, moving away from their autocratic, oppressive communist past into what they saw as a democratic future, which would give them a better life and a better life for their children. That was why I ended up going to Ukraine. When I was asked if I would do some foreign work, which was how the question was put to me and by my boss in the cabinet office one morning, and when I finally came around and said, yes, let me think about it, I said, if I'm going to do it, I'd like to go to Eastern Europe, because, as you know, I've started to develop a knowledge of Eastern Europe and a real love of the region. Quite frankly, everywhere I went, I got a great reception. So, I went out to Ukraine in 2016. I said I've been studying this information since 2014, but my education really took off when I went to Ukraine. And in fact, in my preparation for going to Ukraine, I started studying Russian hybrid warfare. Now, here's the thing, bear with me, folks. Here's the thing, Russian hybrid warfare, Gerasimov doctrine. There's always been propaganda, and we practice propaganda in the West as well, and especially as part of war. Britain famously had some great deceptions in the Second World War to put the Germans off the scent as to where they were going to invade in 1944, and there was all sorts of great stories. But what Russia does is different. And what Russia has done in the Putin era, after the breakup of the Soviet Union, is fundamentally different. They have hybrid war. They have developed hybrid war because they have recognized that in a straight fight, they can no longer stand up to the West. So they have developed, they call an asymmetric model of warfare. And this means that they will use all sorts of different tactics to attack our societies, to disrupt. They will fund people on the far right. They will fund people on the far left. Remind me just to mention before we forget Ireland's new president, Catherine Connolly, for a honourable mention before I go here. They will fund people on the far left and the far right, and they will very often fund people on the far left and the far right in the same country to sow division and discord and to get people. So they will. What we're seeing in the UK at the moment is increasing number of cyber attacks. We are seeing increasing instances of arson, where their practice now is for Russian agents to recruit local criminals, sometimes
That's
very, very
massive
low
here.
level criminals.
I've been shouting
Yeah,
about this for 2 years, and I hope
yeah,
people will
yeah,
understand and waking
yeah,
up. It's not spies
yeah,
anymore. It's not
yeah,
GO units. It's not. They're not going to waste that. They're going to get your scrote who needs
yeah.
his fix,
That's
or an
exactly
alcoholic, or
it.
they're going to.
There
And
was two.
social
There
media's
was
opened that
two
up.
kids. There was two kids in their early 20s convicted here last week. One got 12 years, one got 17 years
Yeah,
for an arson attack on a Ukrainian factory, on a factory that was making supplies for
recruited by
Ukraine.
Wagner of all people.
Recruited by Wagner, exactly. You know the one that I'm talking
Yeah,
about. So this is cyber attacks. We obviously had the assassination attempt of the Skripals, which I worked very, very closely on. The response, both Ukraine's response and then the UK's response, when I went
yeah.
back and worked as part of the National Security Communications team and advising them on disinformation. So we have this hybrid warfare. Some people call it grey zone warfare. The problem is, Shaun, big people, and I don't consider me a big person. I mean, I consider big people, former heads of MI6 or MI5 or former, ambassadors to Kyiv, like the great Lee Turner, who's somebody I follow very, very closely. I consider these big people who have real years and years and years and years experience. My experience comes from recent times. Yes, I crammed an awful lot into 2 years. I speak to my Ukrainian friends every day, but it's only recently that what I call the big voices are talking more and more about Russian hybrid warfare and Russian
Mm.
grey zone warfare. The problem is when I decided to start studying this back in 2014, it's all out there in open source. Google Gerasimov doctrine. Google Russian hybrid warfare. Google Russian disinformation. Go and read Peter Pomerantsev. Go and read Anne Applebaum.
Mm.
Go and listen to Professor Timothy Snyder out of Yale University. Listen to my friend Scott Lucas, another American professor, but lecturing in American politics in University College Dublin, my alma mater, who, by the way, I was chatting to this morning, and I told him I was doing this, and he said, say hi to Shaun.
It's
Great
good,
guy if you
these
haven't been
things. Yeah,
following him. So it's all out there. We haven't paid attention.
yeah, yeah.
We have not done the same way as we haven't paid attention when Putin has told us what he thinks about Ukraine. and that he has no intention of making peace. And if he does, it will only be to draw breath and come back for more. It's why he wants that 25% of Donetsk that he hasn't been managed to take, because in the words of Alexander Stubb, who is the president of Finland, only last week said that that 25%, heavily fortified by the Ukrainians, is the highway to Kyiv and the gateway to the rest of Ukraine.
It's holding them now.
We need to listen to what these people are telling us. We need to open our eyes and look at what's out there. So that's disinformation. That's hybrid warfare. Disinformation is what we want to discuss, is a very, very significant part of that. And we started off this conversation by talking about what? The 5 great lies that Russia told to justify the invasion of Ukraine. Yep. The thing is, and you know, and I know, we have senior politicians. We will hear every day. We will still hear, "Oh, you poked the bear." You know, NATO expanded up to Russia's borders. Oh, well, you know, well, it's like the Cuban Missile Crisis in 1963. It's nothing like the Cuban Missile Crisis in 1963. The countries that joined NATO begged to join NATO as a security guarantee because they knew what they faced. NATO has never been more than a defensive alliance. But these disinformation narratives are very, very effective. But here's the thing. Russia doesn't, with its disinformation, Russia doesn't really want you to believe in any ideology. It wants to throw out so much stuff that you don't know what to believe in. And we call this the fire hose of falsehoods. Remember that, folks, the fire hose of falsehoods. So to give an example from my personal experience, when I came back from my tour of duty in Ukraine as a British diplomat, I was asked to join the National Security Communications team as a assistant director of communications, to advise specifically, to use the experience that I'd gathered 2 years in the Eastern neighborhood. And we were dealing with Skripal at the time. And we were working very closely between the Cabinet Office and the Foreign Office and other bodies, the police and the intelligence service and everything else. And we identified 47 false narratives that the Kremlin put out to say who had been responsible for trying to murder the Skripals. They ranged from Theresa May, they ranged to the mother-in-law, the MI5, MI6, CIA. There was a story that it actually blew in on the wind from Porton Down. The list went on and on and on. And some of them were unbelievable, but there's so much rubbish out there, the fire hose of falsehoods, you don't know what to believe. It's like a book written by the great Peter Pomerantsev, that I have on my bookshelf as well. It's called, he spent 10 years working in media in Russia. And he said that the title of this book is "Nothing is True and Everything is Possible." You know, I'm a communicator and I love my sound bites. One of the first sound bites I coined when I was working for the foreign minister was "Russia lies on an industrial scale." And if you Google Pavlo Klimkin, "Russia lies on an industrial scale," it'll come up with several results. And I got that in the mouths of the foreign minister and the president and the prime minister and everything else. But the reason I did this was just this simple thing. I'll back it up with facts. Saying a huge country lies on an industrial scale. We're brought up not to, but we're in this post-truth era often. So,
and we've been behind in that, it's fair to say. We've been extremely lagging in that.
We have. This is what I'm saying. It's out there, but we've not recognized it. Now, here's the thing. Russia, I was speaking to Ukraine's deputy ambassador in London about a month ago. And he told me that the Kremlin last year spent $1.4 billion on disinformation.
More than its healthcare budget.
This is strategic, this is focused, and this is completely controlled. In the West, quite honestly, it's left up to NGOs like Stop Fake News, great little organization from Ukraine, UCMC, the Ukraine Crisis Media Center, and Bellingcat. People, quite frankly, like you and me, are just doing are bit fighting, punching in the information space. Because I have said, and I am absolutely clear, there has never been a war in history where the information battle is so critical. And they are using our democracy against us. Because ultimately, at the moment, and this is what it comes down to, if people believe that that it's our fault that Russia invaded, as Nigel Farage says over and over again, that it was NATO expansion, and he's running very high in the polls at the moment, you know, and then our government is to spend an extra billion on defense, which means that social welfare is going to be cut, which means that there's going to be cuts. That means we're going to pay higher taxes. Well, if the people in a democracy, and as much as Britain and Ireland and other countries may be flawed, we're actually in less than 10% of the world who live in full democracies. So in that full democracy, if the people cannot be convinced as to why there is a good reason to do this, then they will vote them out. And you'll get somebody like a Nigel Farage, who, regardless of what he says, is going to go in and probably play Putin's game.
We're going to have to end it, mate.
And they use our democracy against us.
They do, and we're going to have to end it there because we're now near 2 sessions in. So I want to thank you for coming again and having a chat with us. It's been an insightful conversation, and you are one of the sharpest communicators out there. Thank you very much. Voices from the Front. We've got another guest coming on Wednesday, which is a guy from America who was exchanging with me. Is going to talk to us about what the ground's like in America and what the thoughts are about Ukraine there. So Alex Druitt will be coming on hopefully on Wednesday, and we'll try and get out Wednesday and Thursday. So thanks very much, Cormac. I'll speak to you after in the back room. Did you last time we talked? You said, "Is the mic off?" I got so many messages, people going, "Hey, what did he talk to you about afterwards?" I said, "I can't tell you. It's top secret. I can't tell you."
Put the mic off. We'll have a quick chat.
All right then, buddy. Thanks very much. See everybody. Bye-bye.